Story 1: The Delivery That Never Ends. It started on a Tuesday, a cold night, the kind where the wind snakes its way through the cracks in your jacket and bites at your skin. Logan had only been working at Red Lantern Express for a week, and already, he was sick of the smell of fried rice and orange chicken seeping into his clothes. "One more run," his manager Dan said, slapping the receipt into his hand. "Same place as the last one." Logan frowned. "The Oakwood Apartments?" "Yeah, 3B. Third time tonight. Maybe the guy's throwing a party or something." Logan glanced at the order. Pork lo mein, egg rolls, and a large wonton soup. Exactly the same as the last two deliveries. He shrugged, pocketed his tip money, and headed out to his car. The Oakwood Apartments sat on the outskirts of town, an old brick complex with busted lights in the parking lot and an out-of-order elevator that hadn't worked in years. It wasn't the worst place he'd delivered to, but there was something about it. The smell of damp carpet, the eerie silence in the hallways, that made his skin crawl. When he knocked on the door of 3B, it opened immediately, just like before. No chain lock, no pause, just a quiet creak as the door swung inward. Logan never saw who was inside. The light was always off, and the only thing he ever noticed was the thin, pale hand that emerged from the darkness to take the bag of food. "Thank you for feeding me," a voice murmured from the shadows. Low, polite, almost reverent. Logan shivered. "No problem, man. Have a good one." The hand disappeared, the door shut, and that was that. No tip, no small talk. Just the same order, the same delivery, the same damn line. By the time he got back to the restaurant, another order was waiting. Pork lo mein, egg rolls, wonton soup, for apartment 3B. By Thursday, Logan was officially freaked out. 7 deliveries in 3 days. All identical. No other driver had ever been sent to 3B, only him. And every time, that same hand, that same voice. Dan didn't care. "We get weirdos all the time," he said, slurping a soda. "Guy probably just likes his routine." Logan wasn't convinced. That night, after handing off the food, he lingered outside 3B, straining to hear anything from inside. A TV, footsteps, a radio, something. But there was nothing. Just silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums and makes your skin prickle. As he turned to leave, he noticed something. The nameplate on the door was blank. No Mr. Lee or Ms. Thompson. Just an empty brass plate with old screw holes where a name should be. That's when the idea hit him. At the front desk, an old woman named Doris handled the building's security. She barely looked up when he approached. "Help you?" "Yeah, I deliver for Red Lantern Express. I've been bringing food to 3B all week. Just wondering if you know anything about the guy who lives there." Doris's face didn't change, but her hand froze over the pages of her crossword. 3B. "Yeah, weird dude. Never turns on the lights. Always orders the same thing." Doris blinked slowly, her expression unreadable. "Honey, that apartment's been empty for 20 years. Logan laughed nervously. "No, that can't be right. I've been delivering there all week. I literally just handed someone food." "Then who the hell are you giving it to?" Doris asked, her voice eerily calm. A chill ran down Logan's spine. He turned and bolted up the stairs, heart pounding. He needed to see for himself. When he reached the 3rd floor, 3B's door was closed. He knocked, louder than before. No answer. He knocked again. "Hey, I know you're in there." Still nothing. Hesitating, he reached for the doorknob. His fingers closed around the cold brass, and the door swung open on its own. The apartment was dark. The smell of old dust and something sour wafted out. Logan fumbled for his phone, switching on the flashlight. What he saw made his stomach drop. The apartment was empty, not just unoccupied, completely gutted. No furniture, no dishes, no curtains. Just peeling wallpaper and a floor coated in dust. Except for the table in the center of the room. On it sat a single takeout bag, the one he had just delivered, and next to it, a stack of old receipts yellowed with age. Logan picked one up, his breath hitching. Pork lo mein, egg rolls, wonton soup. The date? March 3rd, 2005. Logan staggered back, heart hammering in his chest. That's when he heard it. The soft, creaking whisper from the darkness. "Thank you for feeding me." A shadow shifted in the corner of the room, and then the door slammed shut. When Logan woke up, he was lying on the floor of the empty apartment, his head pounding. His phone was dead, and his car keys were missing. He stumbled out into the hallway, disoriented, the air heavy with something he couldn't name. When he reached the front desk, Doris was gone. The lobby was dark, abandoned. Even the street outside felt wrong, silent, empty, as if the world had shifted just slightly out of sync. His car was still in the lot. The keys were in the ignition, and the receipt from his last delivery sat on the dashboard. A single message scrawled in shaky black ink. "Thank you for feeding me." Logan quit his job the next day. He never went back to the Oakwood apartments. But sometimes, late at night, he swore he could hear it. The sound of a knock at his door, and a voice whispering from the darkness. "I'm still hungry." Story 2: The driver who never came back. It started as just another late-night shift. Jeremy Lang was a delivery driver for Dashco, one of those food delivery apps that kept people fed and drivers exhausted. The money wasn't great, but the job was easy. Pick up food, drop it off, rinse and repeat. He liked the solitude of it, the long stretches of road, the feeling of movement without destination. That night, the air was thick with humidity, the sky smeared with low, restless clouds. Jeremy had just finished a drop-off when the app pinged him with another order. It was already past midnight, and he was tempted to ignore it until he saw the payout. $50 for one delivery. The pickup was at Lucky Dragon, a little Chinese joint he'd been to 100 times. But the drop-off, that was what made him pause. South Ridge Industrial Park. The address led to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Jeremy frowned. Maybe someone worked late, a security guard or some night shift guy. He knew those places were half dead, but not completely empty. And $50 was $50. He accepted the order. The drive out was eerie. The roads were empty, the streetlights flickering. He turned onto the main road leading into South Ridge and immediately felt the weight of silence settle over him. It was the kind of quiet that made you aware of your own breathing. The warehouse loomed ahead, a skeletal structure with rusting steel beams and shattered windows. The old sign above the loading dock was faded, barely legible. Ridgeway Shipping Company. Jeremy pulled up and left the engine running. The delivery bag sat on the passenger seat, the smell of General Tso's chicken and hot and sour soup filling the car. He checked the order details again. No name, no special instructions. Just leave at the door. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his feet. The air smelled damp, metallic, like old water pooled in rusted gutters. The place looked abandoned, but a single light glowed above the loading dock, buzzing weakly. Jeremy climbed the short set of stairs and knocked on the heavy steel door. The sound echoed, hollow and unnatural. He knocked again, harder this time. No answer. He pulled out his phone, opened the Dashco app, and tapped the call button. A strange, warbling tone filled his ear, like the signal was struggling to connect. Then, a voice. Low, hoarse. "Come inside." Jeremy hesitated, his pulse kicking up. I can just leave the food out here," he said, shifting uneasily. "Inside." The call cut off. Jeremy licked his lips. Every instinct told him to drop the bag and leave. But then he thought about the money. He thought about how, if he bailed, the customer might report him and Dashco would dock his pay. And then he thought about how stupid he'd feel if this was just some guy working late, too lazy to walk to the door. He pushed the door open. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. The place was cavernous, rows of rusting shelves stretching into the shadows. The only light came from a few old fixtures overhead, flickering like dying fireflies. "Hello?" he called, stepping forward. No response. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Something about the place felt wrong, like the air was heavier than it should be. Jeremy walked past an overturned pallet, his footsteps muffled by the dust-caked floor. In the center of the warehouse, An old desk sat beneath one of the weak lights. On it was a phone, a landline, ancient and yellowed. It started ringing. Jeremy stared at it. Re-thing. He swallowed hard. His fingers twitched at his side. Re-thing. He reached out and picked up the receiver. Silence. Then, "Thank you for delivering." The voice was close. Too close. As if someone were whispering directly into his ear. Jeremy spun around. No one there. The lights flickered, the shadows stretching and twitching. He took a step back, heart hammering. And that's when he saw the footprints. Not his. Fresh. Damp. Leading deeper into the warehouse. Jeremy turned to run. The lights went out, and something moved in the darkness. The next morning, Jeremy's car was found outside the warehouse. Engine still running. Headlights cutting through the early mist. The dashgo bag sat untouched on the passenger seat. The police arrived shortly after. They combed the warehouse, flashlights sweeping over rusted machinery and collapsed shelving. They found no sign of Jeremy, but they did find his phone. It lay on the old desk, screen cracked, the dashgo app still open. The last message on the order read, "Delivered." The security footage from a nearby gas station showed him entering the warehouse at 12:34 a.m. No one ever came out. Dashgo removed the order from their system. The address was flagged, the customer marked as fraudulent. A week later, another driver received an order. Same location, same instructions. He declined it, but someone else would accept. They always did, and the warehouse would still be waiting. Story 3: The order placed from inside his house. Tom Greaves was running on fumes, but he needed one more delivery to hit his night's goal. His phone screen glowed inside the darkened car, his tired eyes scanning the new order. It was past midnight, and the streets were deserted. The delivery came through from Dashgo, a simple burger and fries from a 24-hour diner on the east side of town. Nothing unusual about it, until he saw the address. 329 Elmwood Drive. His house. Tom frowned, rubbed his bleary eyes, and checked again. Maybe it was a glitch, some weird GPS error. But no, the order details were crystal clear. Someone had ordered food to his address. A slow prickle of unease crept up his neck. He lived alone. Who the hell placed the order? His thumb hovered over the cancel order button. But then he hesitated. If it really was a mistake, maybe it was nothing. Maybe he'd ordered by accident, half asleep earlier in the night. Or maybe some drunk idiot typed in the wrong address. Either way, he was tired and ready to go home. Might as well bring the food with him. The drive was eerily quiet. The usual hum of late-night radio shows and distant sirens had vanished, leaving only the soft rumble of his tires on pavement. When he turned onto Elmwood Drive, a strange sensation settled in his gut, heavy and cold. His house sat at the end of the street, porch light casting a pale glow on the driveway. Nothing seemed out of place, but as he pulled closer, his stomach clenched. His front door was open, not just unlocked, wide open. Tom's breath hitched. The dashboard clock read 12:47 a.m. He killed the engine, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles ached. Inside, the house was pitch black, silent. The app on his phone chimed softly. "Your order has been delivered." Tom stared at the notification, heart pounding. He hadn't even left the car. Then something inside the house moved. Tom didn't move at first. Couldn't. His body locked up, muscles refusing to respond. He squinted into the darkness beyond the door, waiting for another sound, another sign of movement. Nothing. A minute passed. Then another. Maybe he'd forgotten to close the door earlier. Maybe the wind had caught it. Maybe a creak echoed from inside. Not the wind. Tom swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. He reached for his phone and hovered his thumb over 911. He should call the cops. That's what a normal person would do, right? Report a break-in, stay in the car, wait for help. But something kept him frozen. The order. Someone had placed it. Someone inside his house. His brain screamed at him to drive away, but his hands had other ideas. Before he fully realized it, he was stepping out of the car, the delivery bag clenched tight in one fist. A cold wind brushed against his face as he approached the open door. "Hello!" His voice barely carried past the threshold. Silence. The hallway stretched before him, shadows pooled in every corner. He reached for the light switch, but when he flicked it, nothing happened. Power's out. His pulse pounded against his temples. He stepped inside, just past the doorway, his footfalls barely making a sound on the wooden floor. The air smelled off, like something had been left rotting for too long. The delivery bag crinkled in his grip. "Anyone here?" His voice came out steadier than he felt. Still nothing. But then, from the kitchen, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A new notification from Dashko. "Your order has been received." And then, in the chat function, a message. "Thank you for feeding me." Tom's stomach lurched. From the corner of his eye, something moved. Fast. He spun, heart hammering. For a split second, he swore he saw something at the end of the hallway. A shape impossibly thin, limbs too long, crouched near the floor. But the second his eyes focused, it was gone. The air shifted. A whisper of movement, barely a breath. And then the door slammed shut behind him. Tom bolted for the door, hand slamming against the knob. It didn't budge. Locked. His pulse thundered as he pounded against the wood. "Hey, who the hell is in here?" His voice cracked, but he didn't care. Something laughed in the dark. Low, wet, gurgling. Tom's blood turned ice cold. He staggered backward, hands fumbling in his pocket for his keys, his phone. Anything. The shadows in the hallway seemed to pulse, to shift closer. His phone vibrated again. Another message. "Go to the bedroom." Tom's breath hitched. His bedroom. The one at the end of the hall. A cold sensation crawled up his spine. The kind of dread that settled in your bones when you realized you had no good options left. But his feet were already moving. One step, then another. The hallway stretched longer than he remembered, each step taking twice as long, the air thick like wading through syrup. His bedroom door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness yawning inside. He reached it, pushed it open. Inside, the room was dark, but his bed wasn't empty. A shape lay beneath the covers, completely still. Tom's breath shuddered out of him. He reached out, hands trembling, and yanked the blanket back. His own face stared up at him, mouth open, eyes glassy, skin waxy and pale. Dead. Long dead. His phone buzzed. One final message. "Now we are both home." The light bulb flickered once. Then the world went dark. The next morning, a Dashko driver pulled up to 329 Elmwood Drive. He'd gotten a high-paying order, but the house looked abandoned. The front door was wide open. A cold wind whispered from inside, and on the porch sat a delivery bag, untouched. The app chimed softly. "Your order has been delivered." Story 4: The Silent Diner. Jack Monroe had been delivering food for years, but some nights stuck with him more than others. This was one of those nights. The order came in just before midnight: burger, fries, and a milkshake, from a place called Earl's Diner on the outskirts of town. He'd never been there before, never even heard of it. When he pulled up, the diner was the kind of place that felt stuck in time. Neon sign flickering, parking lot cracked with weeds, the windows dimly lit from the inside. It should have been closed, but there it was, still open, still waiting. Inside, a single customer sat in the farthest booth. A woman, dressed in a pale blue dress, hair pulled into soft curls. She didn't look up when Jack approached, just sat there, hands folded on the table, staring at something unseen. He cleared his throat. "Order for, Diane?" She turned, just slightly, and nodded once. No smile, no sound, just took the bag and placed it in front of her. Jack hesitated. Most people at least muttered a thanks or gave a polite nod, but she just sat there. Something about her felt off. The air inside the diner was thick, like a room that hadn't been aired out in years. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. "All right, well, have a good night," Jack mumbled before turning to leave. The door creaked as he stepped out, the cool night air washing over him. When he glanced back through the window, The woman hadn't touched her food. She was just staring at him. The next night, the same order came through. Same diner. Same name. Jack hesitated before accepting it, but curiosity got the better of him. When he arrived, nothing had changed. The neon sign still flickered, the parking lot still cracked, and Diane was right there, sitting in the same booth, hands folded, staring blankly ahead. He walked in slower this time, eyes scanning the place. There was no other customer, no sound except for the faint hum of the kitchen appliances. He set the bag on the table. "Here you go." Diane nodded, took the bag. Jack cleared his throat. "You, come here often?" No answer, just that same slow nod. A chill ran up his spine. He glanced toward the counter, where an older man, probably the owner, was wiping down a glass. Jack jerked his head toward the woman. "Hey, is she always here?" The owner froze. His knuckles went white against the rag. Jack started, but the owner cut him off. "You should leave." Jack blinked. "What?" The owner's face had gone pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You shouldn't take orders for that table." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" That table's been empty since 1986, the owner said, voice barely above a whisper. "After she was murdered right there." Jack's stomach twisted into a knot. He turned back to the booth, but Diane was gone. Only the delivery bag remained, untouched. The diner went silent. Jack stumbled backward, breath coming fast. The owner just shook his head, muttering under his breath. "She always comes back. Same order, same seat. Been happening for years." Jack bolted for the door, heart hammering in his chest. As he yanked it open, the neon light above flickered, and in the reflection of the glass, Diane was standing right behind him. Jack didn't take another order for Earl's Diner. Not after that night. But sometimes, when he drove the late-night shift, his phone would buzz with a new request. Same order, same name, same address. And when he passed by the old diner, the neon sign still flickering in the dark, he could always see her, sitting in that booth, hands folded, waiting for someone to bring her home.